Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Working remote up north is the kind of job that either hardens you or breaks you. For me, it was a bit of both. I'd been stationed at the Aurora Ridge Research Outpost, about 60 miles east of a small Alaskan town called Valen Creek, for nearly 5 winters. The place sat right at the edge of the Kluane ice fields, where the wind screamed day and night, and the sun barely rose for a few weak hours. I wasn't a scientist. I was one of the mechanics. My job was to keep the generators running and the fuel lines from freezing solid. The pay was good, but the real reason I kept coming back was the silence. Out there, you could hear your own heartbeat echo. Our crew that year was just 4 of us. Me, Rick, Jonas, and Calder. All old hands, all tired of city noise. We'd been on rotation since early January 2020. By mid-February, the temperatures had dropped to -45, and the wind chill made it feel worse. The night it happened, we were wrapping up maintenance on the west pipeline line, the one that snaked toward the frozen coastline. The plan was to finish and head back to the outpost before the next whiteout rolled in. Rick drove the tracked snow hauler, I rode shotgun, and Jonas and Calder followed in a second vehicle hauling parts. We were halfway back when Rick spotted something through the flurries. At first, it looked like a shadow on the snow, a dark smear against the endless white. But as we drew closer, I saw it was a person, a figure, stumbling along the drifted road. "Out here?" Rick muttered. "No way anyone's walking in this." He slowed the hauler to a crawl. The figure was maybe 50 feet ahead now, a man, judging by the build. His parka was an old blue military issue, the kind we hadn't seen in years. He moved in a jerky, mechanical rhythm. Step, drag, step, drag. Rick honked the horn. Nothing. "Maybe he's hurt," I said. Rick nodded grimly and stopped the vehicle. The snow stung like glass when we stepped out. The man didn't even flinch. When we reached him, he was mumbling something under his breath, his lips cracked and pale. His skin looked wrong, chalky, like frost had eaten the color away. And his eyes? They were colorless, cloudy like melted ice. Rick gripped his shoulder. "Hey, you okay?" The man turned slowly. His movements were too smooth, too fluid, like his joints didn't have bones behind them. His mouth kept moving. The words sounded like numbers. 461, 461. What? Rick leaned closer, but the man didn't respond, just kept repeating that same set of numbers. We couldn't leave him. Not in that weather. So we guided him toward the hauler, or tried to. His body was cold, solid as frozen meat. But he moved with us like a puppet, no resistance. When we got him inside, the frost on his coat didn't even melt in the heat. Jonas and Calder caught up and climbed in, staring at him wide-eyed. "Where the hell did he come from?" Jonas asked. Rick didn't answer. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he turned the hauler back toward the outpost. The drive took nearly 3 hours through the storm. The stranger sat silent between Jonas and Calder, eyes fixed on nothing. The cabin filled with the sound of the engine and the whisper of his voice. That endless sequence of numbers. 461. 461. Jonas tried to talk to him. No response. Calder swore he recognized the man's parka. Said it looked like one of the old expedition uniforms from Project Echo, a government survey that went missing around these parts in the 90s. The hairs on my neck stood up. I remembered the rumors, too, about an entire team of geologists that disappeared during a magnetic survey. Their camp had been found half buried in ice, equipment frozen mid-operation. no bodies ever recovered. We reached Aurora Ridge near midnight. The storm was tearing at the metal siding when we hauled the stranger inside. The generator lights flickered, casting everything in pulses of yellow and black. As soon as we crossed the threshold, the man's body went completely limp. Jonas nearly dropped him. We laid him on one of the bunks in the med room. His pulse was faint, but there. When I removed his parka, a metal tag clinked onto the floor. It wasn't a dog tag. It was an equipment marker, engraved Echo Unit 461, property of U.S. Arctic Survey, 1994. That number again. Rick cursed under his breath. You gotta be kidding me. I wanted to call base, but the radio was nothing but static. The storm had killed our connection. So we waited. The man didn't move for hours, just lay there, breathing shallowly. At around 2:30 a.m., Calder shook me awake. He's talking again. We gathered in the med room. The man's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. His lips moved in that same dry rhythm, whispering between cracks of frozen skin. 461. Open. Below. Rick's voice trembled for the first time I'd ever heard. Below what? And then the power went out. The lights died with a hiss, plunging us into total darkness. The only sound was the storm hammering outside, and the faint whisper of his voice in the black. We scrambled for lanterns. When the light flared back, the bunk was empty. We tore through the outpost. Every corridor, every storage bay. Nothing. The outer doors were still bolted from the inside. There was no way he could have left. Then we heard it. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate, coming from beneath the floor. Jonas went pale. That's the fuel line tunnel. We all grabbed flashlights and opened the maintenance hatch. The air that rushed up was bitter and still, smelling faintly of brine, like the ocean, even though we were hundreds of miles inland. Rick went first. I followed, my flashlight cutting through the darkness of the metal tunnel. It stretched under the outpost like a ribcage, lined with frost and hanging icicles. Halfway down, we found footprints in the rime. Bare. Human. They led deeper toward the lower valve chamber, where the tunnels met the frozen ground. The trail stopped at a heavy hatch labeled E461. I swear my blood turned to ice, that number again. The hatch wheel was rimed with frost, but slightly ajar, like it had been opened recently. Jonas muttered. We sealed this last week. What the hell? Before he could finish, the metal beneath our feet vibrated. A low, groaning sound that rose into a pulse, like something breathing beneath the ice. Rick grabbed my shoulder. We're leaving. Now we scrambled back up the ladder, slamming the hatch shut. The moment it locked, the vibrations stopped. But when we returned to the main floor, Jonas wasn't with us. We called his name, searched every corner. His flashlight lay near the hatch, still on, beam cutting across the frozen floor. No Jonas. Then the radio crackled to life. At first it was static, then a voice, weak, distant, echoing like it came from a mile underground. Help! It's cold down here. It was Jonas. They're not dead. They're waiting. And then the line cut. We made the call to leave at first light. By dawn, the storm had eased, and the snow outside was clear. No footprints led from the outpost, not even our own from the night before. The entire world looked scrubbed clean. We packed what we could and left in the hauler. Rick drove in silence. Calder stared out the window, muttering prayers under his breath. When the base finally came into radio range, we reported everything. The man, the disappearance, the tunnel. They told us to stay put, said a rescue team would be dispatched. But I didn't wait. That night, as we camped in the hauler, I dreamed of the man again, standing in the snow, mouth moving, whispering those same words. 461. Open below. When I woke, the hauler door was open. Calder was gone. His seat empty. The snow outside untouched. That was 2 winters ago. The outpost was officially shut down last spring. They claimed it was unstable ground. Permafrost shifting, making the site unsafe. But sometimes, when the weather's right, the new survey teams report signals coming through the static. A faint voice counting. 461, 461. And every few months, when the wind hits just right, something knocks from under the ice. The nights up here don't end. They just stretch. Long, silent, frozen ribbons of darkness that never loosen their grip. By mid-November, I'd already stopped checking the clock. I'd been manning the counter at Northwind Gas and Service, a lonely outpost along the Klondike Highway, about 46 miles south of the Yukon border. The kind of place truckers stop only because there's no other choice for 200 miles. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep my rusted Subaru running. My boss, Harold, was a quiet old-timer with nicotine yellow fingers and a permanent squint. He didn't ask questions, just told me to keep the coffee hot, log every vehicle after midnight, and never, under any circumstances, turn off the front lights, even if the power flickered. Most nights were uneventful. You'd get a couple of long-haul drivers topping off before Whitehorse, the odd hunter, sometimes a tourist who'd taken the wrong turn toward the Arctic Circle. The silence out there was heavy, pressing in from the dark woods and endless snow. Then came my third Wednesday on the job. The wind that night screamed like something alive. Snow whipped sideways, slamming against the glass hard enough to rattle the display of instant noodles behind me. I was halfway through counting cigarette cartons when I noticed a faint glow cutting through the storm. A pair of headlights rolling slowly up the highway. It was an old pickup, probably from the 80s. Blue, maybe? Hard to tell under all that snow. The engine idled roughly as it pulled into pump 3, then just stopped. The driver didn't step out, didn't even shut the engine. Through the frosted windshield, I could barely make out a shape in the driver's seat, still hunched slightly forward. After about 10 minutes, I figured he might be passed out, or maybe fighting with a frozen lock. I threw on my parka, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit me like a hammer. Within seconds, my eyelashes froze together. When I reached the truck, I realized the headlights weren't actually shining. They were flickering, like they were powered by something dying. I rapped on the window. No response. The windshield was crusted with frost from the inside, but I could see enough. The driver was slumped forward, face hidden beneath the brim of an old wool cap. His hands were fixed on the steering wheel at perfect 10 and 2, but something about them seemed off. Too stiff, too gray. I took a step back. Before I could say another word, the truck jolted in reverse, tires squealing over the ice. It rolled back onto the highway, taillights disappearing into the snow like a vanishing ghost. When I told Harold about it the next morning, he just shrugged. "Winter does strange things out here," he said. "Forget it, kid." But he didn't look at me when he said it. A week later, next Wednesday, same hour. The wind was worse. I'd stayed up with 3 cups of coffee, and my eyes glued to the CCTV feed, trying to pretend I wasn't waiting for it. And right on cue, at 1:59 a.m., the same blue pickup crawled out of the whiteout and rolled to a stop at pump 3. Exactly the same spot. Exactly the same time. Exactly the same way. This time, I didn't go outside. I just zoomed the feed in as far as the grainy camera would let me. The driver sat motionless, not even a twitch. The snow didn't melt on his hood. The exhaust pipe puffed faint, uneven bursts, but none of it seemed right. I watched for 10 minutes, then 15. Then, like before, the reverse lights flared. The truck eased backward, turned, and slipped into the blizzard until nothing was left but darkness. When Harold arrived for his shift, I asked if he'd ever seen anything like it. His jaw tightened. He told me to leave it alone and added, "Truckers get lost. Some find their way back, some don't." That night, I saved the camera footage to a USB stick. I told myself it was for curiosity's sake, but deep down, I already knew. I was dealing with something old, something patient. By the third Wednesday, curiosity had curdled into obsession. I swapped shifts with Mark so I could be there again. Spent the whole evening setting up the camera angle just right, making sure the timestamp was visible on screen. At 1:57 a.m., the radio behind the counter crackled. A burst of static, followed by a faint voice, male, distant. "Pump 3? Can't find. Pump 3. My blood ran cold. The voice was slow, warbling like a signal bouncing through time. Then the headlights appeared again. The same blue truck. But this time, the driver's window was rolled halfway down. Through the static on the camera feed, I could see his face, or what was left of it. The skin looked dried, stretched tight across bone, the mouth slightly open. His eyes, God, his eyes were glassy, colorless, frozen. He wasn't moving, not breathing. The timestamp read 2:10 a.m. when the lights dimmed, and I saw it. His lips moving. Just once. The words were unreadable, but I felt them like a whisper in my skull. I tore the USB from the console and locked myself in the supply closet until sunrise. When Harold came in that morning, I told him everything. He didn't interrupt once, just smoked 3 cigarettes in silence, then went into the back room. When he came out, he was holding an old ledger book covered in dust. "Check the back," he said quietly. Inside were pages of handwritten notes dating back to the late 80s. Most were routine, fuel deliveries, shift changes. But here and there, one line stood out. Blue pickup, pump 3, 2 a.m. No driver visible. Repeated sighting during storm. The earliest entry was from February 1989. I looked up. "You knew about this?" He didn't answer, just walked over to the window and stared into the white horizon. "Some things out here don't stop driving," he muttered, "even after the road ends." I couldn't sleep. I went digging through public archives in Dawson City, then online forums, newspaper scans, anything. That's how I found it. An article from January 1988. Local miner, Daniel Kirk, 31, missing after leaving work at the Eagle Ridge camp during a severe blizzard. Last radio contact indicated he had stopped for gas near mile marker 46 on the Klondike Highway. Neither he nor his vehicle, a blue 1986 Chevy pickup, were ever found. The photo made my stomach twist. It was him. The same empty eyes, the same face. There were other reports, too. Every few years, someone disappeared near the same stretch of highway. Drivers, travelers, even an RCMP officer once. Always winter, always storms, always around 2 a.m. By the fourth Wednesday, the obsession had turned into something darker. I needed to see it up close, to prove it wasn't all in my head. The sky was clear that evening, stars bright against a pale horizon. For a moment, I thought maybe the curse was broken. But around 1:40 a.m., the wind shifted. The stars disappeared behind gathering clouds. Snow began to fall again, slow and deliberate, like the sky was warning me to leave. I stayed. At 1:58, I heard the hum of that engine long before I saw the lights. When the truck pulled in this time, I noticed something new. The pump's digital screen came to life on its own, numbers flickering as if someone were fueling up, even though no one had moved. I stepped outside, heart pounding. The cold was razor sharp, slicing into my lungs. My flashlight beam wavered as I approached the truck. The driver's door was ajar. For the first time, it was open. Snow didn't touch the seat. The air around the vehicle shimmered faintly, like heat mirage in freezing air. Inside, a faint radio static played, a looped voice whispering the same line. "Still looking for pump 3. Still looking." The words stretched, distorted, until they blended into the wind itself. When I leaned closer, something caught my attention on the dashboard. A photograph, cracked and yellowed with age. A man, a woman, and a little girl, smiling in front of a pickup truck. The same truck. The man's face was Daniel Kirk. My light flickered, and then every power source in the station went dead. No lights, no hum, just the soft growl of the truck's engine and the shrieking wind. I turned toward the station. Through the front window, faint white shapes were moving inside. 4 of them. Figures in winter coats, standing motionless in the aisles. Their faces were pale, hollow. Their breath left no fog on the glass. And then, one by one, they all turned their heads toward me. My flashlight went out completely. The only light left came from the truck's dashboard, flickering faintly. I turned back and froze. The driver's seat was empty. But there was someone standing behind the truck now, facing me through the snow. No movement, no sound. Just a tall shadow wearing that same wool cap. He raised one arm slowly and pointed, not at me, but toward the gas station. When I looked back, the figures inside were gone, replaced by frost spreading across the windows. The ice formed words, slow, jagged, deliberate. Find the road we lost. Something moved inside the truck. A voice, broken and hollow, rasped through the open window. Still driving. Can't find the way. That was enough. I bolted through the storm, slammed the station door shut, and collapsed behind the counter. My phone had no signal. The clock on the wall read 2:47, but my watch said 2:09. Time had broken. When power finally surged back to life, everything was normal again. No truck, no footprints, no message. Only the smell of gasoline in the air and a faint frost stain on the inside of the front window, shaped like a handprint. I quit the next day, left everything behind. My paycheck, my parka, even my Subaru when it wouldn't start. That was 2 years ago, but sometimes, when I drive through snowstorms at night, I catch a flicker of blue light in my rearview mirror. A pair of headlights, steady and patient, following at a distance. And when I check the clock, it's always the same. 2 a.m. sharp. October 2021. That was the month everything changed between me and my father. We'd been planning a hunting trip for months, a week out in the wilderness, deep in the Black Hollow Range, somewhere between Montana and the Idaho border. It was supposed to be a reconnection trip, our first real time together since I'd moved to Portland for work 3 years ago. Dad was 59, an ex-forester who practically lived for the woods. He'd spent over 20 years patrolling those mountain valleys, knew every ridge, every dry creek bed, every whisper of the wind like his own breath. Me? I'm 29. I work in data analytics. I stare at screens. I live on takeout and emails. I thought a few days off-grid might actually fix something, maybe between us, or maybe inside me. We drove up in Dad's old Ford F-250, the one that still smelled like coffee and oil. Guns locked up, camping gear stacked in the back. The plan was simple. Set up camp, track elk through the timberline, spend 5 days unplugged from everything human. The first day went perfectly. We hiked about 6 miles in, up past a frozen creek that twisted through the valley. We found a ridge that overlooked a small meadow and set up camp right there. The air was cold, not freezing, but the kind that nips at your face and makes coffee taste like heaven. Dad was in his element, pointing out tracks, checking wind direction, showing me the same little tricks he'd learned decades ago. By dusk, we'd built a fire, cooked some canned chili, and shared a flask of whiskey under a ceiling of stars, so sharp they looked like broken glass. Everything felt right. Simple. Peaceful. If I'd known what was watching us that night, I'd have begged Dad to drive home. The next morning started normal. We followed a narrow game trail through the timber, moving slow, scanning for sign. About 3 hours in, Dad stopped suddenly, dead silent, and crouched. He pointed toward the base of a fallen tree. At first I didn't see it. Then my stomach twisted. There, spread across the snow, were the remains of a deer, or what was left of one. But not like any predator kill I'd ever seen. The bones had been picked clean, unnaturally clean, the marrow smooth and polished. But what made my skin crawl was how they were arranged, not scattered, not random. They formed a pattern, a perfect ring around a flat stone, and in the center of that ring, the skull stared straight up at the sky. Dad didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, he whispered, "That's not a bear, or wolf. They don't clean bones like that." He ran a finger along one rib bone. It was cut, not chewed. The edges were too precise, almost surgical. I looked around. No tracks, no blood trail, no drag marks, nothing. It was like the animal had been taken apart piece by piece, and then someone, or something, arranged it like art. We tried to shake it off and keep moving, but 2 miles later, we found another one. A snowshoe hare this time. Tiny bones laid in a spiral pattern around a patch of dark, frozen moss. Again, no prints, no feathers, no blood. Dad stared at it for a long time. "Something's watching us," he muttered, "leaving these for us to find." By midday, we'd come across 4 more of those strange arrangements. A raven's feathers laid in perfect circles. A half-eaten fox skeleton, clean as ivory, surrounded by quartz shards. And each one closer together, fresher. The forest grew silent. No birds, no wind. Even the trees felt like they were holding their breath. We set up camp early that night. Neither of us wanted to hike further. Dad kept the fire burning high, his rifle across his lap. I offered to take first watch. He didn't argue. For the first few hours, it was just quiet, the crackle of wood and the distant groan of trees. Then, around 1:47 a.m., I heard Dad whisper my name. "Eli, don't move, just look." His voice was shaking. I turned slowly, following his gaze toward the tree line, and there they were. 2 golden eyes reflecting the firelight. High, at least 8 feet off the ground. They didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. The longer I watched, the more I realized. They weren't animal eyes. They had focus, awareness, the kind of intelligence that makes your chest go cold. Dad raised his rifle slightly, but before he could even aim, the eyes just vanished. Not ran, not blinked out. Gone. Like they'd never been there. The next day, we barely spoke. Both of us were on edge, glancing over our shoulders every few minutes. Around noon, we reached a high ridge overlooking the frozen valley. Dad raised his binoculars and froze. "Eli! Oh my God!" He handed them to me, his hands trembling. Across the valley, maybe half a mile away, stood the biggest wolf I'd ever seen. But wolf doesn't describe it right. It was huge, the size of a horse, maybe bigger, with fur so dark it seemed to swallow the light. Along its spine were streaks of silver, not like fur, but like metal catching the sun. It was standing still, facing directly toward us, watching. I felt my pulse in my throat. Dad whispered, "It's been following us since day one." As if to prove him right, the creature turned, walking along the ridge with a slow, deliberate stride. And every 50 yards, it would stop and look back, waiting for us to see, like it was leading us somewhere. That was when Dad snapped. He grabbed my arm and said, "We're done. We're leaving." Now we didn't argue. We didn't stop for food or water. We just started moving. But the deeper we descended, the more we realized it was hurting us. Every few minutes, we'd hear faint footsteps above us, just out of sight. A low growl echoing through the canyons. At one point, I looked back up the slope, and I saw it again. Standing in the distance, perfectly still, silhouetted against the gray sky, watching. It wasn't chasing us. It didn't need to. It knew exactly where we were going. By the time we reached the truck, it was almost dark. Dad threw the gear into the bed and turned the key so fast the tires spun on gravel. As we drove away, I looked into the side mirror, and for just a split second, I saw those two golden eyes in the distance, watching, waiting. We never went back. Dad sold all his hunting gear that spring. He never spoke about it again. But sometimes, when I'm home late at night, and I see the way the streetlights reflect in a puddle just right, I remember those eyes. And I know, whatever that thing was, it's still out there, still watching the ridge, still waiting for someone else to cross its line. Because that wasn't a wolf. It wasn't even an animal. It was something older. Something that hunts for the pleasure of being known. They called it the Silent Valley Project. After 6 years of tracking wildlife migration in smaller research roles, I finally got my first chance to lead an independent field expedition. A real step forward in my career. A study on how climate change was shifting the migratory behavior of Arctic caribou across northern Alaska, near the Kobuk River Basin, one of the most remote and least explored stretches of wilderness on the continent. When the assignment came through in May 2018, I felt this rush of excitement. Finally, a leadership position. Finally, something meaningful. Our goal was straightforward. Track and analyze 52 GPS-collared caribou over 3 weeks, documenting their altered migration patterns as temperatures rose and permafrost began to thaw. It sounded simple enough, but nothing about what followed was simple. We were a 5-person team. Dr. Marcus Heller, our senior biologist, and my mentor. Nina Alvarez, drone and data technician from Anchorage. Samir Patel, a young but sharp field engineer. Maya Jensen, an ecology grad student who specialized in behavioral mapping. And me, Dr. Evelyn Ross, field biologist and project lead. We flew into Kotzebue, then took a small twin-engine bush plane to a stretch of flat tundra near the Tagna Valley, about 50 miles north of the Arctic Circle. Our base camp was set up on the remnants of what used to be an old military research outpost from the 1970s. The place had been long abandoned, but its concrete slabs and rusting metal structures made it perfect for our purposes. Stable, elevated ground for sensors, and good line of sight for aerial drones. But from the moment we arrived, something about the place felt wrong. The silence was the first thing that hit me. Even in the wild, there's usually sound. The wind, birds, insects, distant water. But here, nothing. Just the low hum of our equipment and the occasional snap of frozen brush underfoot. For the first week, everything went according to plan. Each morning, we'd gather around the tablet screens, watching dozens of red dots move across our digital maps, the collared caribou. Their patterns were fascinating, routes slightly shifted, herds splitting earlier than expected, grazing zones that no longer matched their historic norms. The data was gold. We were ecstatic. At night, we'd sit near the campfire, the temperature dropping below freezing even in late May. The aurora sometimes shimmered faintly above us, a green ribbon twisting across the night sky. But as the days went by, I started noticing small, unsettling things around the base. Old metal pylons, standing in perfect geometric alignment. Too deliberate to be random. Cables, half buried under the moss, leading to nowhere. Concrete foundations arranged in a strange grid, as if part of some larger structure had once stood there. But there were no blueprints, no mention of it in any archived maps. Dr. Heller dismissed it as leftover military infrastructure. Still, something about it gnawed at me, that uneasy feeling of being watched. It happened on our 9th night in the field. I was inside my tent, logging data from the GPS units when Samir burst in, his face pale and sweating. "Evelyn, you need to see this," he stammered. All 52 GPS signals, gone. Vanished from the screen simultaneously at 11:09 p.m. No gradual fade, no individual disconnects, just gone. Like someone had severed every link at the same second. The system showed no errors. The satellites were fine, backup receivers were fine. But the map was empty. We spent hours running diagnostics, rebooting everything, scanning frequencies. Nothing. Even the radio telemetry was dead silent. No pings, no beacons, not even interference. Just void. Outside, the night was eerily still. No wind, no animal calls, not even the faint rustle of grass. The silence pressed on us like a weight. Even Nina, usually the calmest among us, whispered, "It feels like the world's holding its breath." At dawn, we set out toward the last recorded position of one of the herds, a cluster roughly 8 miles northeast of camp. The terrain was brutal. Uneven tundra, hidden sinkholes, patches of half-frozen swamp. But what struck me most wasn't what we found. It was what we didn't find. No caribou tracks, no droppings, no signs of grazing. Nothing. It was as if the animals had never been there. Even stranger, every camera and motion sensor we'd installed in that area was still functioning perfectly, still recording data, but showing absolutely nothing from the previous night between 11 o'clock and midnight. Just black frames. That evening, Nina suggested we review the thermal drone footage from the same time window. We gathered in the main tent, huddled around her laptop, the wind beginning to rise outside. The footage started normally. Patches of glowing white heat signatures marking distant animals, a few foxes, maybe an owl. But at 11:07 p.m., 2 minutes before the data blackout, something appeared. 7 shapes. They emerged from the tree line like shadows pulled into form. Tall, easily over 7 feet. Moving in perfect unison, each motion mirrored exactly across all 7 figures. Their heat signatures were wrong. Warmer than the surrounding air, but not as hot as any living mammal. Like something in between, mechanical, yet alive. They walked across the clearing where our sensors had been placed, each step measured, deliberate, identical. When the lead figure lifted its arm, the others copied it in perfect synchronization. Then, in a single motion, they all turned and disappeared into the valley's darkness. The footage ended. No one spoke for almost a full minute. Then Dr. Heller, his voice shaking slightly, said, "Whatever they are, they knew exactly where our sensors were." That night, we established a strict buddy system. No one left their tent alone. Every hour, we radio checked. At 3 a.m., I woke up to the faint sound of something clicking, a rhythmic metallic pulse echoing through the valley. I thought it was the wind until it stopped abruptly. Then I heard Maya whispering from the next tent. She sounded panicked, her voice trembling. "Evelyn, there's someone walking outside." We froze. Through the thin nylon walls, I could hear faint footsteps, steady, evenly spaced, circling the camp. Then silence. We waited, breath held, until morning light seeped through the horizon. But when we emerged, Samir's tent was empty, his cot untouched, his boots gone, every piece of equipment still neatly arranged. We found his boots 3 hours later, placed side by side on a flat stone beside the frozen river. Perfectly clean, perfectly aligned. No footprints leading to or from them. The rock beneath was bone dry, even though the entire valley was coated in dew. Dr. Heller called for emergency extraction, but the satellite phone signal was dead. The drone battery drained itself instantly when Nina tried to launch it. We were cut off. By the final night, we were running on pure fear. The valley's silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt listening. Every so often, a low vibration trembled through the ground, like distant machinery buried deep below. At 2:17 a.m., the temperature sensors on our screens began spiking randomly. Then, movement. The figures appeared again. 7 glowing shapes surrounding our camp, forming a circle. Each stood perfectly still, facing inward. Then, in unison, they began to move, rotating around us in perfect synchronization. Our instruments went haywire. The radio emitted a continuous high-pitched tone. The lights flickered. And then, blackness. I don't remember what happened next. When I woke, it was morning. The tents were collapsed, the equipment destroyed. Only Nina and I were left. Dr. Heller and Maya were gone. We hiked 15 miles south until the rescue chopper spotted our signal flare. The official report called it a data loss and personnel disappearance due to environmental factors. But I know what I saw. 2 months later, a forestry worker found one of our GPS collars, still active, buried in the valley's gravel near a concrete foundation. Its recorded timestamp? May 23rd, 11:09 p.m. The exact minute everything went dark, I never went back to Alaska, and I never worked another field project. Some places aren't meant to be studied. Some silence hides things that want to stay hidden. Every time someone mentions northern Canada, I get this heavy feeling in my chest. People picture the untouched wilderness, the mountains, the glassy lakes reflecting the aurora. But all I can think about is that night at Frost Valley Lodge. It was the summer of 2021. I'd just finished my second year at college and wanted to escape everything. City noise, people, life. So I found this seasonal job through a friend of a friend, front desk clerk and maintenance help at a small, family-run lodge deep in Yukon territory. The Frost Valley Lodge sat right on the edge of an old mining trail, surrounded by thick black spruce forests and rolling hills that swallowed sound. There were 8 wooden cabins scattered across the property, connected by gravel paths that always crunched beneath your boots. The nearest town, Eagle Crossing, was nearly 50 miles away. No cell service, no internet, just one landline phone in the main office that only worked on clear days. When the wind howled at night, it sounded like the mountains themselves were breathing. Most days were peaceful, routine. I checked guests in, repaired the odd heater, cleaned up, and stared at the endless twilight sky. But sometimes, that silence got inside your head. It was too still, too perfect, like the world had paused. That week in July, we only had 3 cabins booked. A couple, Ryan and Claire, and their friend, Ethan. They'd been on a photography trip through northern Canada, chasing the last glows of the midnight sun. Ryan was tall, confident, the kind of guy who filled every room with his voice. Claire was his opposite. Quiet, observant, always smiling politely but rarely speaking unless asked. Ethan, their friend, was the calm one, more reserved, but with a good sense of humor when he opened up. They were staying in cabin 4, right by the tree line. The first few days were uneventful. Long hikes, dinner at the lodge, and late-night laughter echoing down the path. But on their 4th night, something changed. I was closing up the office around 9 p.m. when I heard raised voices coming from the direction of the cabins. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard Ryan's deep voice echo. Angry, sharp, cutting through the night. I couldn't make out the words, but there was tension. Claire's voice followed, trembling but firm. Then silence. 10 minutes later, Ethan walked alone toward the bathhouse carrying a towel and a change of clothes. He waved when he passed by, forcing a smile, and disappeared into the dim wooden building. It was one of those dusky summer nights where the sun never fully sets, just a cold orange glow fading across the treetops. I thought nothing of it until about an hour later. I was back in my cabin reading when I heard frantic knocking outside. When I opened the door, Claire stood there, shaking, her face pale as snow. "Ethan's gone," she said, voice trembling. He didn't come back from the bathhouse." Ryan appeared behind her, out of breath. "We've been looking for him everywhere," he said. "He was supposed to be back half an hour ago." At first, I thought it was another simple case, someone wandering off, maybe exploring the trails. But the way they looked, Claire's eyes wide with fear, Ryan's hands twitching, it didn't feel right. I grabbed my flashlight and followed them toward the bathhouse. The wooden door creaked when I pushed it open. The interior smelled of damp pine and soap. Steam still clung to the air, and the light above the mirror flickered faintly. Ethan's towel was hanging on a hook. His clothes were folded neatly on the bench, but there was no sign of him. Then, I noticed something on the floor, muddy footprints, 2 sets, one leading in, one leading out. But the one going out looked strange. Drag marks. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Claire whispered, "What's that?" and pointed to a smear on the lower wall near the door. It looked dark, maybe dirt, maybe not. Ryan quickly stepped between us, saying, "It's nothing. Probably just mud. He's probably just messing with us." But his voice didn't sound convinced. I wanted to use the landline to call for help, but when we got back to the main lodge, the line was dead. Not even static, just silence. Ryan said maybe the weather had knocked it out, but the sky was clear. Something was wrong. We decided to search the area with flashlights. The forest around the lodge was dense, cold, alive with the sound of insects and wind. But beneath that, there was something else, something heavier, like the air itself was listening. Claire kept whispering Ethan's name, but there was no response, just the echo of her voice swallowed by the trees. After about half an hour, I noticed Ryan was staying unusually close to us. Whenever Claire moved ahead, he'd grab her wrist or pull her back. His flashlight kept sweeping nervously behind us. Around midnight, I suggested we stop and head back. It was too dark, too easy to get lost. Ryan disagreed immediately. "We keep searching," he said, jaw clenched. "He's out here somewhere." But Claire looked exhausted. Her voice cracked. "Ryan, please. I can't do this anymore." That's when I saw it. Faint scratches on Ryan's hands, just above his wrists. Fresh. When I asked about them, he quickly shoved his hands into his pockets. "Branches," he muttered. "Nothing." I didn't believe him. We returned to the lodge around 2 a.m. Claire collapsed into a chair, shaking. Ryan said he was going back to the cabin to get some supplies. I offered to go with him, but he refused. Too fast, too defensive. Something about the way he said, "I'll be quick," sent a cold ripple down my spine. When he left, I waited a few minutes, then followed, keeping my flashlight low. The air was thick with mist rising off the valley floor. Every step on the gravel felt too loud. Ryan's cabin door was slightly ajar. I could see light flickering inside. Through the gap, I watched him kneel beside his duffel bag, shoving something heavy inside. Then he wrapped something long in a towel. Something metallic glinted for a second under the light. A knife. He zipped the bag, stood up, and turned toward the window. I barely managed to duck behind the woodpile before he stepped out, the duffel slung over his shoulder. His face was pale, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. He walked back toward the lodge, and I followed at a distance. When I got back inside, I pretended to be half asleep in one of the lobby chairs. Ryan placed the bag near the door, sat down across from Claire, and said nothing. We sat there in silence till sunrise. At dawn, I suggested we search again, this time in daylight. Claire immediately agreed. Ryan didn't. He argued, saying, "We'll just confuse the search area." But Claire was determined. "We're going," she said. So the three of us walked back toward the bathhouse. Morning light revealed things we'd missed in the dark. Marks on the dirt near the trees. Something dragged. A few drops of dried brown on the steps. Claire found a torn strip of flannel caught in a bush near the tree line, the same pattern Ethan's shirt had. She gasped and turned toward Ryan. "This is his, isn't it?" Ryan froze. For a moment, I thought he'd deny it, but instead, he whispered, "We need to leave. Now." Then faintly, from deeper in the forest, we heard something. A sound like a moan. Claire screamed Ethan's name and ran toward it before I could stop her. Ryan followed, yelling after her. We pushed through the trees until we reached a small ravine, about 100 yards from the property. There, tangled in the roots, was Ethan, barely conscious, covered in dirt and blood, one arm twisted at an unnatural angle. He was alive. When I knelt beside him, he grabbed my wrist weakly and whispered one word, "Ryan." Before I could react, Ryan lunged forward, yelling, "He's delirious! Don't listen to him." But by then, I already knew. I sprinted back to the lodge, my heart hammering, praying the phone line had come back to life. It hadn't. But the old radio in the manager's office, the one we used for weather updates, still worked. I called out on the emergency frequency, hoping someone would hear. An hour later, I heard the distant sound of a helicopter. The thumping grew louder until it hovered over the clearing beside the lodge. 2 Canadian Rangers jumped out, followed by a paramedic. When they found Ethan, he was in bad shape but breathing. They airlifted him immediately. As the medics were loading him up, one of the Rangers asked us what happened. Before I could speak, Ryan stepped forward, smiling nervously. "It was an accident," he said quickly. "Ethan fell down near the creek. We tried to find him, but Claire snapped. "He's lying!" she screamed. "Ryan attacked him!" Everything exploded at once. The Rangers restrained Ryan, who was shouting nonsense, swearing that Ethan had attacked him. But when they searched Ryan's duffel bag, they found the knife, still stained, and a pair of wire cutters. The phone line had been cleanly severed. Later, I learned the truth. Ethan and Ryan had been business partners. They'd invested money into some photography expedition that went bankrupt. Ryan blamed Ethan for the loss. That night, he snapped. Attacked him near the bathhouse, thinking he'd killed him. Claire had helped move the body in panic before realizing Ethan was still breathing. Ethan survived. Barely. Ryan was charged with attempted murder. Claire testified against him and vanished somewhere down south. I quit my job that same day. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see that mist rolling through the spruce forest, hear the soft crunch of gravel underfoot, and feel that same hollow silence pressing down on my chest. Frost Valley Lodge shut down after that summer. Locals say it's haunted, that sometimes hikers passing through hear a faint tapping sound near the old bathhouse, like someone trying to use a broken phone line that'll never ring again. And I believe them, because sometimes, in my dreams, I still hear that static, and somewhere inside it, Ethan's voice whispering my name. Most summers, my Uncle Ray would drag me somewhere far from cell service. Places so deep in the wilderness, you started wondering if the rest of the world still existed. He said he did it to clear his head. I always thought he just liked the silence, the kind that feels too heavy to breathe in. That year, we went up north, past a little town called Stillwater Ridge, a place you won't find on many maps. The locals said the roads washed out every winter, and the state just stopped trying to fix them. We parked his truck where the dirt trail ended, and hiked the last 2 miles along a river that looked more like a ribbon of gray glass, calm on top, but hiding something cold and fast underneath. It was my 14th summer, the first time Ray let me bring my own gear. He got me a small rod, a proper knife, and an old lantern that smelled like kerosene and rust. I remember feeling proud, like I'd earned a spot beside him instead of being just the kid tagging along. We set camp near the water, tucked between a wall of pines that groaned when the wind hit just right. The first day was quiet, just the way Ray liked it. No music, no phones, no noise except the water hitting rocks. By the second afternoon, he'd gone to check his snares up the ridge, telling me to stay close to camp and keep the fire going. He said it would only take an hour. It was bright out, that buoyant, hazy Alaskan light that never really decides if it's day or dusk. The air smelled like wet moss and old smoke. I was sitting by the river, lying in the water, pretending to be patient, when I heard someone call from behind me. "Hey there, kid." I thought it was Ray at first. Maybe he'd circled back early. But when I turned, the man standing by the tree line wasn't him. He was taller, thinner, wearing a brown canvas coat so filthy it looked more like the forest than fabric. His boots were soaked halfway up, dripping a dark line into the dirt. He smiled, just barely. "You fishing alone out here?" I remember thinking that was a strange question. Nobody out here fished alone. You either came with family or didn't come at all. "My uncle's nearby," I said. "He'll be back any minute." The man nodded, eyes fixed on the river behind me. "That's good," he said softly. "You shouldn't stay near the water too long when it gets quiet like this." His voice didn't sound threatening, more like he was giving advice. But something about the way he didn't blink made my stomach twist. He took a few slow steps closer. The mud didn't even crunch under his boots. Said he was a local trapper working near the ridge. Claimed one of his crates had washed downstream and asked if I'd help him haul it back up. He pointed into the woods behind him. "There's a trail right through there, just a short walk." But I didn't see any trail, just thick alder brush bending inward, snapped and dark, like something big had pushed through it recently. "Can't," I said. "My uncle told me not to leave camp." He smiled again, wider this time. I saw a space where one of his front teeth should have been. "Good kid," he muttered. "He teaches you right." Then, under his breath, almost too quiet to hear, he added, "Most don't listen." That's when I noticed his hands. They were tucked behind his back, the whole time. He hadn't moved them once since he showed up. Something about that felt wrong, like his arms weren't there to wave or point, but to hide something. He took another step forward, and I instinctively stood, backing toward the riverbank. "Tell your uncle," he said, voice suddenly flat, "that they still come down here." Especially when it's this calm, I opened my mouth to ask what he meant. But before I could, he tilted his head slightly, listening to something behind me, like a sound I couldn't hear. Then he smiled again, too calmly, and said, "Guess I'll see you later then." He turned and walked into the trees, disappearing into the shadows, like he'd been waiting for them to swallow him. When Ray got back, I told him what happened. Every word. He didn't say much, just grabbed the rifle from the tent and scanned the tree line. Then, without a word, he started breaking down camp. We left before sundown. Halfway down the gravel road, Ray finally spoke. "Where exactly did you see him?" I pointed back toward the bend in the river, where the trees closed in. He went quiet again, jaw tight. Then said, almost to himself, "That ridge used to be part of a settlement. Back in the 50s. Flood wiped most of it out. A lot of folks didn't make it. I asked if he thought the man was from there. Ray just shook his head. Ain't nobody living out there now." That night, we checked into a small roadside lodge in town. It was the kind of place that still used brass keys and buzzed fluorescent lights. Ray went out to talk to the owner, some old guy who'd lived there his whole life. When he came back, his face looked drained. He said, "I ain't the first one to see someone near the river," Ray muttered. "A couple of hikers last fall reported a man in brown clothes, said he tried to lead him off trail. They followed him a little ways till they noticed. His boots weren't leaving tracks anymore." He didn't say anything else that night. Neither did I. But when I tried to sleep, I couldn't. I kept replaying that man's voice in my head, the way he said, "You shouldn't stay near the water too long when it's quiet." The next morning, Ray went to the ranger station. They didn't seem surprised, said they'd check it out when the weather cleared. That was 3 years ago. Nobody ever found anyone out there. No tracks, no camp, no crates. A few months back, I was scrolling through a wilderness forum, one of those places where hunters and hikers trade ghost stories between trail updates. Someone from the Stillwater area posted about finding boot prints by the river, deep and wide, half filled with black water. Said they led down to the bank and just stopped. No drag marks, no retreating steps. Like whoever made them walked straight into the current and didn't come back out. They said they also found something else. An old canvas jacket hanging from a tree branch, half torn, still dripping from the rain though it hadn't rained for days. That post got deleted a few hours later. Sometimes I think about that man, how still he was, how calm. Like he wasn't trying to scare me, just passing along a warning he already knew wouldn't change anything. I don't know if he was real or something older, tied to the river itself. But I do know this. Every year, someone disappears out near Stillwater Ridge. Hunters, campers, fishermen, it doesn't matter. Their gear washes downstream. Their tracks lead into the water. And every time the reports mention the same thing. A man in brown clothes, hands behind his back, smiling like he's already been there too long. Ray won't talk about it anymore. We fish closer to town now, near the sound of boats and voices. But sometimes, when the wind dies and the water goes still, I swear I can hear that same calm voice again, right behind me, quietly saying, "You shouldn't stay near the water too long when it gets quiet like this." I still don't know why I kept driving that night. Maybe because the road was too quiet. Or maybe because turning around meant admitting something was wrong. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip. Just me and my daughter, Lena. She's 16. Loves photography, mountains, and old folk music that somehow makes her small speaker sound haunted. We were headed toward Willow Creek for her school's regional art contest. She'd been talking about it for weeks, and I'd promised her we'd take the scenic route through Hatcher Pass, one of Alaska's most beautiful drives. I'd taken a few days off from the clinic, packed the Subaru, filled up at a station outside Palmer, and thought we'd make it before sunset. The sky was that kind of pale winter blue that makes everything look frozen in time. The air crisp, the roads quiet. Too quiet, maybe. We'd been driving for about an hour when I first noticed it. A set of headlights behind us. Distant at first, then closer. I remember thinking, finally, another car. Because that stretch of road can feel like you're the last people left on Earth. But that relief didn't last long. The lights stayed behind us. No passing. No fading. Just there. When I slowed, they slowed. When I sped up, they matched me perfectly. At first I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe they were heading to the same town. But after 20 minutes of that same steady distance, I felt the first pinprick of unease crawl up my spine. "Dad, that truck's been behind us for a while," Lena said quietly. Truck. I hadn't noticed it before. The shape. A boxy old pickup with fogged headlights and a grille patched with metal bars. Looked like something from the 80s, built to survive an apocalypse. Its paint looked black, but when my brake lights hit it, I saw dull streaks of rust. "Probably another traveler," I said, trying to sound calm. "These roads don't have many turnoffs." She didn't respond. She just kept staring through the rear window, phone in her lap, thumb hovering over the camera app. I told myself not to get paranoid, but every time I checked the mirror, those same headlights stared back, unwavering. After a while, the sun started dipping behind the mountains, painting everything in cold orange light. And that's when the feeling changed. The truck edged closer, not tailgating, just near enough to make me aware of every breath. I flipped on my blinker and slowed down at the next turnout, hoping it'd pass. It didn't. It pulled over with us. I stared at it in the mirror, engine idling, exhaust rising in thick white clouds. No movement inside, just darkness behind the windshield. Lena whispered, "Why'd he stop?" "I don't know," I said. We sat there for maybe 30 seconds. Then I decided to pull back onto the road. The truck waited 2 seconds, then followed. At that moment, my stomach turned cold. Something about the way it mimicked every move felt deliberate, almost playful. There's no cell reception in that part of the pass, not for miles. I tried anyway, holding my phone up toward the windshield. Nothing. "Keep your camera ready," I told Lena. "Dad, just in case." The next 10 miles were some of the longest of my life. The road wound through valleys lined with pines, so tall they blocked the last of the daylight. The world turned blue, then black. The only sounds were our tires crunching through gravel and the low hum of that engine behind us. It never got closer, never drifted away. Just stayed there, a constant shadow. When the first snowflake hit the windshield, I realized how fast the temperature was dropping. We'd crossed into higher elevation. Then we saw it, an old roadside turnout up ahead. A half-broken sign read, "Gold Mint Trailhead, 1 mile." "Let's stop there," I said. "There's usually parking, and maybe some lights." We turned in. The lot was small, maybe 4 spaces. Cracked asphalt half covered with snow. No lights, no other cars. But there was a small wooden shack near the edge of the trees, probably a ranger post or information hut. I parked facing it. My headlights illuminated its door, half open, swaying slightly in the wind. The truck followed in. It didn't park beside us. It angled itself behind my Subaru, cutting off the exit completely. That sound, the engine idling low, filled the air like growling. I could feel Lena trembling beside me. "Don't get out," I said. I wasn't going to. The truck lights flickered once, then again. Then they shut off completely. Darkness swallowed everything. I leaned forward, peering into the mirror, but couldn't see a thing. The cab was pitch black. Then, a sound. Tap. It came from behind the car. Then another. Like metal clicking against metal. Lena whispered, "Dad." "I hear it." I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas, but the truck didn't move. We bumped lightly against its grill. I could feel it pressing against us. Then I slammed the brakes. Nothing. Still silence. And then, from somewhere beyond the trees, a faint light appeared. A flickering white beam, maybe a flashlight. "Someone's there," Lena gasped. But as it moved closer, I realized it wasn't a flashlight. It was a lantern. An old glass lantern swinging slowly, its flame dim yellow in the snow. A figure stepped out from the tree line. At first, I thought it was a hiker. Heavy coat, boots, hood up. But something was off. The shape moved wrong, stiff, like it didn't bend properly at the knees. It stopped about 10 feet from the truck. The lantern swayed once. Then, the truck's headlights turned back on, blasting us in white. I couldn't see anything but glare. I slammed the gas and turned the wheel hard, driving through the narrow side of the lot, skidding into snow and bouncing over uneven ground until we hit the main road again. When I looked in the mirror, both the truck and the lantern were gone. Just gone. We didn't speak for several minutes. My hands were shaking on the wheel, my chest tight. Finally, Lena broke the silence. "Dad, I got some of it." "What?" "The video." When the lights went out. "Look," she showed me her phone. The footage was grainy, but you could see it. The truck pulling in, the door of the shack swinging, and then, for half a second, a glimpse of the figure with the lantern. But what made my stomach turn was the reflection. In the windshield of the truck, faint but visible, there were two silhouettes, one in the driver's seat and one in the passenger's, moving independently. We made it to Willow Creek around 10 p.m., pulled into a crowded diner with bright neon lights. I called the Alaska State Troopers right there from the parking lot. They sent a patrol out toward Hatcher Pass. I showed them the video. The officer's face changed when he saw it. He told me we weren't the first to report something like that. There'd been at least 5 incidents in the last few years, all involving an unmarked truck shadowing drivers near the same pass. Each time, the driver description was inconsistent. Sometimes one man, sometimes 2. Always late evening, always the same stretch. He said they'd found tire tracks before, but they never led anywhere. They'd vanish halfway into the woods like the vehicle just stopped existing. The trooper thanked us for the footage and asked us not to travel that route again at night. I still have that video saved. I sent copies to a cloud drive, to my brother, even to a friend in Anchorage, just in case. Sometimes, when I watch it again, I pause on that single frame, the one where the lantern appears. And in the faint reflection of the glass door behind it, I can see something I didn't notice before. Another figure, deeper in the woods, holding what looks like a second lantern, standing perfectly still. We never took the Hatcher Pass road again. Now, whenever I have to drive at night, I keep my headlights on high, my tank full, and my phone recording. Because out there in the Alaskan dark, sometimes the roads remember you, and sometimes they wait.